in the first 6 months of the year. Import and export volumes have increased. Remittance inflows, critical for household consumption and investment by businesses, increased by more than a third in the first half of 2021 compared to the same period the year before. This growth momentum is expected to continue in the medium term and reach pre-COVID-19 levels of 3.2% in 2023.
Somalia is doing better than before. It's always getting better and better, in spite of the fact that Somalia today is going through a tense period of elections. In spite of that, I think factors are all positive. Domestic revenue, which is a very important measure of recovery and success, has been picking up despite the coronavirus and the effect of the coronavirus. Exports and imports are also improving very well.
Before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Somalia's health sector had been slowly emerging from 3 decades of civil war and instability. The pandemic exposed and aggravated the pre-existing broader structural issues facing the country's healthcare infrastructure, making the response by the government wholly inadequate. Given the scale of the economic devastation and as the country's infections near 20,000 cases, with only 0.6% of the population fully vaccinated, the government has increased the healthcare spending to about 5% of the federal government's total expenditure. Targeted investments in health service delivery, financing, and sector stewardship would strengthen the sector, improve healthcare outcomes, and increase emergency and epidemic preparedness towards economic stability and growth.
General markii la yiraahdo isku socodkii ama maraakiibta ha noqoto ama kaargooga diyaaradaha ku keeni jirnaa ha noqoto aad ay noo saameysay waxaan ka dareemaysaa badeecadaha kala duwan aan hayno qiimihii waagii hore aan ka jirnay qiimaha hadda ka dhigno qiimaha hadda ya boqolkiiba wax badan oo ka badan tii hore waana saameyn guud oo ganacsiga ku yeelata COVID-19.
The World Bank's Somalia Economic Update Edition 6 explores ways of investing in healthcare to anchor growth. How can the Somali health sector be strengthened to better respond to health needs by improving outcomes and increasing emergency and epidemic preparedness? Catch the World Bank Economic Update exclusively on GovJog and YouTube on Tuesday, 14th of September from 9 a.m.
waxaan dhageystayaal ku soo dhawaada barnaamij gaar ah oo aanu uga hadli doono isbedelada dhinaca dhaqaalaha ee Soomaaliya oo barnaamijkeena maanta uu si gaar ah ugu saabsan yahay. waxaa markaa barnaamijkeeda la socodsiinaya anigu Maxamed Bishaar. ku soo dhawaada marka iyo barnaamijka aan uga hadlayno dhaqaalaha dalka. waxaana warbixin uu ka diyaariyay Bangiga Adduunka dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya aanu si gaar ugu eegayno barnaamijka iyadoo sidoo kalena falanqayn iyo dood ku saabsan arintaasi aanu ku sameyn doono barnaamijka. barnaamijkaas waxa uu si toos ah markaa ugu saabsan yahay dhaqaalaha dalka iyadoo labada saac ee soo socotana aanu ku eegi doono ama ku sahmin doono heerka isbedelada dhinaca dhaqaalaha ee dalka iyo saameynta uu sameeyay inta lagu jiro xanuunka COVID-19. waxaa sidoo inta barnaamijku socdo lagu soo biri doono wasiirka maaliyadda xukuumadda Soomaaliya Dr. Cabdiraxmaan Bayle iyo la taliyaha wasaaradda caafimaadka dalka Dr. Maxamed Jaamac iyo maamulaha guud xafiiska Bangiga Adduunka ee Soomaaliya oo isna markaa waa yara ka qayb gali doona waa Christina Sefson. inta barnaamijku socdo waxaad nagala socon kartaan oo aad si gaar ah uga daawan kartaan GovJog TV. sidoo kale waxaad nagala socon kartaan live streamka page-ka Facebook aanu ku leenahay GovJog TV iyo waliba Twitter-ka @GovJog TV. iyadoo sidoo kalena aad nagala socon kartaan page-ka Twitter-ka ee Bangiga Adduunka ee @MBF1 Somalia oo aad kala socon kartaan halkaas oo su'aalihiina ku soo qori kartaan ama nagu soo weydiin kartaan. sidoo kalena su'aalahaas waxaan weydiin doonaa martida ka qayb galaysa barnaamijka inta uu socdo. sanadkan isbedelada ama dhinaca dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya marka la fiiriyo waxa uu yimid iyadoo adduunyada idil dhaqaalaheeda uu si xooggan marka isbedel ugu yimid taas oo ugu wacanaya la leeyahay marka loo eego xanuunka COVID-19 oo saameyn ku yeeshay kaas oo isbedel weyn ka sameeyay dhinaca kobaca dhaqaalaha adduunyada isla markaana abuuray usdhac weyn isbedelada dhinaca dhaqaalaha iyo lacagaha adduunka. inkastoo ay jirto xaalad adag marka loo fiiriyo dalalka saxaraha ka hooseeya ama sub-Sahara Africa haddana waxaa jirta kobac aada u hooseeya oo ku aadan gobolka idin dhaqaalihiisa marka loo fiiriyo sanadkii 2021 waxaa la leeyahay qiimeyn la sameynayo kobaca dhaqaalaha 2.6 boqolkiiba waxa uu ahaa mid aada uga duwan marka la fiiriyo sanadka 2021 bishii October iyadoo taageero dhinaca horumarka ana bangiga adduunka uu ku sameeyay dhaqaalaha dalal badan oo Afrika oo Soomaaliya ay ku jirto hadaba sidaas bedeladaasi marka uu yimid dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya iyo sida loo qiimeeyay warbixin laga sameeyay aad barnaamijka kula socon doontaan oo ku eegi doona waxaana warbixintaasi aad ka heli doontaan macluumaadka sida marka dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya iyo bangiga adduunka warbixinta uga diyaariyay iyadoo mas'uuliyiinta ka qayb galeysana aad su'aalo ku weydiin doontaan goobjoog TV aad kala socon doontaan daawadayaal iyo dhageystayaal idinkoo markaa su'aalihiina ma soo weydiin doona sidoo kalena warbixinada la qiimeeyay ee ku saabsan barnaamijka intuu socdo ka heli doontaan waxa kamid ah iyadoo xanuunka safmarka ee COVID-19 uu si adag ugu dhuftay dalal badan oo markaa iyagu u nugul xanuunkan oo ay ka mid tahay Soomaaliya isla markaana ku adkaatay xaaladda marka loo fiiriyo dhinaca dhaqaalaha saameynta uu ku sameeyay aawadeed Soomaaliya hadda waxay u muuqanaysaa mid xoogaa ka soo kabanaysa dhibaatadaas iyadoo isbedel aan sida markaa u buurnayn xagga dhaqaalahana uu muuqanayo inkastoo ay jirto ayaa la leeyahay income ama markaa dakhliga soo gala aad hoos ugu hooseeyo ama wax soo saarka wadanka uu aad u hooseeyo marka loo fiiriyo qiimeynta la sameeyay taas oo markaa ku eg 3.9 boqolkiiba sanadkii 2020 isbarbardhig lagu sameeyay sanadka marka loo fiiriyo hadda socdo haddaba saf marka uu weli socdo xanuunka COVID-19 ayaa saameyntiisa weli uu leeyahay taas oo si xanuun badan uu ugu reebay dalal badan oo Soomaaliya ku jirto sida marka horumarka dhinaca dhaqaalaha uu sameeyay xanuunkaasi iyo qiimeyntii kala duwaneed ee dhowrka sano ugu sameeyay ugu dambeysay la iska barbardhigay ku saabsan xanuunkan ayaad ku daawan doontaan barnaamijka waxaa aad markaa dhinaca dadka falanqeeya dhaqaalaha iyo weliba warbixintu ay taabanaysaa in xayiraadaha socodka iyo ganacsiga uu aada u sameeyay COVID-19 inay keentay habacsanaan aada u weyn oo dhinaca dhaqaalaha iyo wax soo saarka iyo weliba noocyada kala duwan ee dhaqaalaha dalku uu leeyahay oo Soomaaliya ku jirto oo dalal badana marka la fiiriyo bishii August 2020 qiyaastii dhamaadkeeda waxaa lagu qiimeeyay ilaa iyo sanadkii 2021 bishii August intii u dhaxaysay in marka la wariyay ilaa iyo 118,000 oo xaaladood oo ku saabsan xanuunka coronavirus kaas oo galaaftay ama sababay dhimashada ilaa iyo 1,000 qof oo xanuunkaas u geeriyooday intii u dhaxaysay August 2020 ilaa iyo August 2021 haddaba cabirkaasi ayaa waxa uu markaa meel dhigay in weli uu socdo faafitaanka xanuunka COVID-19 kaasoo saameyntiisa weli leh haddaba waxaa markaa si gaar ah nooga daawan doontaan oo ku soo biiri kartaan goobjoog TV idinkoo la soconaya barnaamijka bangiga adduunka uu taabigelinayo ee dhaqaalaha warbixinta uu ka sameeyay Soomaaliya oo aad kala socon doontaan stuudiyaha goobjoog TV sidoo kale xusuuso waxaad su'aalahaada ku soo diri kartaa ama ku soo qori kartaa page-ka Facebook goobjoog aanu ku leenahay iyo barta Twitter-ka goobjoog TV adigoo sidoo kalena aad soo raaci karto isla markaana aad su'aalahaada ku soo diri karto World Bank Soomaaliya page-ka Twitter-ka ay ku leedahay @mbf1 Somalia daawadayaal la socod wanaagsan inta barnaamijkaasi uu socdo sidaan hore idinku sheegay waxa barnaamijka ka qayb gali doona oo marti ku ah wasiirka wasaaradda maaliyadda xukuumadda Soomaaliya Dr. Cabdiraxmaan Bayle oo barnaamijka markaa ka qayb gali doona isla markaana warbixinta bangiga adduunka uu ka sameeyay isbedelka dhinaca dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya markaa aragtidiisa iyo qaybtiisa xukuumadda ama doorka ay ku leeyihiin ka dhiban doona isagoo sidoo kalena ka hadli doona sida isbedelkaasi ay iyagu markaa ula socdaan iyo waxyaabaha dhinaca dhaqaalaha la qorsheynayo sanadka soo socda sidoo kale waxaa barnaamijka ka qayb gali doona sidaan idiin sheegay wasaaradda caafimaadka xubno ka socda gaar ahaan la taliyaha guud ee wasaaradda caafimaadka Dr. Maxamed Jaamac oo barnaamijka marti ku noqon doona iyo maamulaha guud ee bangiga adduunka xafiiskiisa Soomaaliya Christina Sefson oo iyana barnaamijka qayb ka noqon doonta haddaba la socod wanaagsan inta barnaamijka uu socdo 2 saac soo aadan idinkoo markaa si toos ah nooga daawan doona page-ka Facebook-ga barta Twitter-ka iyo YouTube-ka goobjoog TV sidoo kalena la socon doona ama soo raaci kara barta twitterka bangiga adduunka mbf1 waa at mbf1 Somalia daawadayaal kusoo dhawaada barnaamijka anigoo Maxamed Bashaar ayaa idin la socodsiinaya.
dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya ayaa ka soo kabanayay wajiga saddexaad ee caabuqa COVID-19 dadkii ka dhashay roobabkii iyo duulaanka ayaa kaasoo dalka ku habsaday sanadkii 2020 kobaca dhaqaalaha wax soo saarka dalka ayaa lagu qiyaasay inuu gaari doono 2.4% sanadka 2021.
Somalia is doing better than before. It's always getting better and better, in spite of the fact that Somalia today is going through a tense period of elections. In spite of that, I think factors are all positive. Domestic revenue, which is a very important measure of recovery and success, has been picking up despite the coronavirus and the effect of the coronavirus. Exports and imports are also improving very well.
hor intuusan soo shaacbixin caabuqa COVID-19 laamaha kala duwan ee caafimaadka Soomaaliya waxa ay ka soo kabanayeen 30 sano oo burburiyo xasilooni dara. caabuqa ayaa daaha ka qaaday caqabado waaweyn oo haystay qaab dhismeedka laamaha caafimaadka Soomaaliya marka la eego baaxadda burburka dhaqaale ee jira iyo caabuqa COVID-19 oo ku faafay ilaa 20,000 qof iyadoo ay jirto eber dhibic 6 boqolkiiba dadweynaha ay si buuxda u qaateen talaalka COVID-19.
general markii la yiraahdo isku socodkii ama maraakiibta noqoto ama kaargooga diyaaradaha ku keeni jirnaa noqoto aad ay nooga saameysay. waxaan ka dareemaysaa badeecadaha kala duwan ee hayno qiimihii waagii hore aan gadi jirnay qiimaha hadda gadayna qiimaha hadda ya boqolkiiba wax badan oo ka badan tii hore waana saameyn guud oo ganacsiga ku yeelatay COVID-19.
warbixinada banka adduunka ee ku saabsan dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya qaybtooda 6 waxa ay sahmin ku sameynaysaa qaabka ugu wanaagsan ee loo maalgelin karo daryeelka laamaha caafimaadka si loo helo kobac ku yimaada adeegyada caafimaadka. sidee laamaha caafimaadka Soomaaliya loo xoojin karaa si ay wax uga qabtaan baahiyaha caafimaad iyadoo laga falcelinayo xaaladaha degdega ah iyo cudurrada sida lama filaanka ah ku faafa. warbixinada banka adduunka ee ku saabsan dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya waxaa si qaas ah uga heli kartaa goobjoog maalinta Talaadada taariikhda 14 September saacadu markay ku beegan tahay 9 subaxnimo.
Somalia's economy is rebounding from the triple shocks of COVID-19 pandemic, floods, and locust infestations that ravaged the country in 2020. Real GDP growth is projected at 2.4% in 2021. These owed to encouraging performance in the first 6 months of the year. Import and export volumes have increased. Remittance inflows, critical for household consumption and investment by businesses, increased by more than a third in the first half of 2021 compared to the same period the year before. This growth momentum is expected to continue in the medium term and reach pre-COVID-19 levels of 3.2% in 2023.
Somalia is doing better than before. It's always getting better and better, in spite of the fact that Somalia today is going through a tense period of elections. In spite of that, I think factors are all positive. Domestic revenue, which is a very important measure of recovery and success, has been picking up despite the coronavirus and the effect of the coronavirus. Exports and imports are also improving very well.
Before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Somalia's health sector had been slowly emerging from 3 decades of civil war and instability. The pandemic exposed and aggravated the pre-existing broader structural issues facing the country's healthcare infrastructure, making the response by the government wholly inadequate. Given the scale of the economic devastation and as the country's infections near 20,000 cases, with only 0.6% of the population fully vaccinated, the government has increased the healthcare spending to about 5% of the federal government's total expenditure. Targeted investments in health service delivery, financing, and sector stewardship would strengthen the sector improve healthcare outcomes, and increase emergency and epidemic preparedness towards economic stability and growth.
general markii la yiraahdo isku socodkii ama maraakiibta ha noqoto ama kaargooga diyaaradaha aan ku keeni jirnaa ha noqoto aad ay nooga saameysay waxaan ka dareemaysaa badeecadaha kala duwan aan hayno qiimihii waagii hore aan gadi jirnay qiimaha hadda aan gadayno qiimaha hadda yaa boqolkiiba wax badan oo ka badan tii hore waana saameyn guud oo ganacsiga ku yeelatay COVID-19.
The World Bank's Somalia Economic Update Edition 6 explores ways of investing in healthcare to anchor growth. How can the Somali health sector be strengthened to better respond to health needs by improving outcomes and increasing emergency and epidemic preparedness? Catch the World Bank Economic Update exclusively on GovJog and YouTube on Tuesday, 14th of September from 9 a.m.
waxaad weli la socotaan barnaamijkan uga hadlaynay dhaqaalaha dalka Soomaaliya iyadoo sidaan hore idinkugu sheegnay barnaamijka dhawaan ku soo biri doonaan oo ay ka qayb gali doonaan mas'uuliyiin kala duwan oo ka socda xukuumadda federaalka Soomaaliya iyo qaybaheeda kala duwan gaar ahaan wasaaradda caafimaadka dalka iyo waliba wasaaradda maaliyadda iyadoo sidoo kalena barnaamijka ku soo biri doonto oo ay ka qayb gali doonto maamulaha guud ee xafiiska bangiga adduunka ee Soomaaliya Christine Simpson oo barnaamij ka qayb qaadan doonta laakiin waxa su'aalaha markaa aad ku soo qori kartaan ama ku weydiin kartaan inta barnaamijku uu socdo adinkoo nagala soconaya GovJog TV studioda sidoo kalena page-ka Facebook-ga GovJog ayaad kala socon kartaan oo su'aalihiin aad ku soo qori kartaan adinkoo sidoo kalena nagala socon kara Twitter-ka GovJog TV sidoo kalena waxaad nagala socon kartaan oo aad soo raaci kartaan barta Twitter-ka ee bangiga adduunka ee @mbf1 Somalia oo aad su'aalihiina ku soo qori kartaan adinkoo markaa su'aal weydiin doona martida kala duwan ee ka qayb galaysa barnaamijka isbeddelka dhaqaalaha ee Soomaaliya oo markaa warbixinta laga sameeyay sanadkan barnaamijka markaa ku eegi doono oo aad la socon doontaan waxa sanad kasta bangiga adduunka Soomaaliya uu ka sameeyaa iyo waliba dalal badan oo Afrika iyo kamid ah Asia isbeddelka kobaca dhinaca dhaqaalaha saameynta uu sameeyay iyo waliba meelaha ugu badan ee dhaqaalaha wadamadaasi markaa uu ka liito iyadoo warbixinta Soomaaliya sanadka laga sameeyana ay ka duwan tahay marka loo eego sanadihii la soo dhaafay dhinaca dhaqaalaha hayeeshee waxa si weyn markaa warbixintu ay u taabanaysaa adduunyada ee dil sida saameynta ugu sameeyay xanuunka markaa ee COVID-19 kaasoo si weyn markaa u galaaftay kobac badan oo dhinaca dhaqaalaha ah iyo lacagaha dalalka adduunyada gaar ahaan dalalka ka hooseeya Saxaraha ama Sub-Sahara Africa la isku yiraahdo Soomaaliya qayb ka tahay oo si weyn markaa u sameeyay xanuunkaasi iyadoo markaa xayiraadaha isu socodka dadka isdhexgalka iyo waliba qaybaha kala duwan ee ganacsigana uu aad markaa u saameeyay xanuunkaasi taasoo abuurtay in kobaca ama dhaqaaqa dhinaca dhaqaalaha dalkasta uu sameeyay inuu aad markaa isbeddel ugu sameeyay oo saameyn badan uu ku sameeyay waxa si gaar ah marka la tilmaamay dalal badan oo aad markaa ugu nugul xanuunkaasi Soomaaliya ka mid tahay inuu si weyn u saameeyay oo uu marka loo eego isbarbardhig laga sameeyay warbixinta bangiga adduunka uu ka sameeyay sanadkan marka loo eego 3 sano la soo dhaafay in marka ay ka duwan tahay tan oo markaan ay kala siman tahay dalal badan laakiin ay u sii dheer tahay sida uu sameeyay xanuunka COVID-19 kaasoo kaliya aan isbeddel ku sameyn dhinaca dhaqaalaha hayeeshee galabtay nolosha dad badan oo iyagu markaa qayb ka ahaa wax soo saarka iyo isbeddelka dhinaca dhaqaalaha sameyntiisa dalka kuwaas oo markaa ganacsiga yaryar iyo kan dhexaba ka shaqeynaya qaarkoodna markaa iyagu fursad u haleeli waayeen inay sameeyaan si joogto ah ganacsigooda taa ugu wacan tahay xanuunka coronavirus hayeeshee sida markaa xanuunkaasi uu saameynta u yeeshay ayaa weli socda waxaana dad badan oo markaa iyagu ku xeeldheer arrimaha dhaqaalaha ay si weyn uga hadleen isbeddelkaasi inay ugu wacan tahay kaliya xanuunka COVID-19 inaysan laakiin ay ka mid tahay isbeddelada dhinaca nolosha dalka Soomaaliya ka jira iyo sida saameynta xagga siyaasadda markaa ay ugu leedahay Soomaaliya oo xilligan lagu jiro xaalad kala guur ah watahay warbixinta ayaad kaga bogan doontaan iyo sida markaa falanqaynta aan uga sameyn doono barnaamijka intuu socdo 2 saac ee soo socota dhageystayaal waxaa markaa madaawadayaal aad ka heli kartaan goobjoog t v studioda adinkoo sidoo kale kala socon karaa pageka youtube-kana ku leenahay goobjoog t v sidoo kale facebook page ayaad nagala socon kartaan sidoo kale waxaad naga eegi kartaan twitterka pageka aanu ku leenahay goobjoog waa goobjoog t v sidoo kale waxaad la socon kartaan pageka twitterka ee bangiga adduunka warbixinta isagu ka sameeyay dhinaca dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya ku leeyahay at mbf1 waa Soomaaliya oo halkaas su'aalihiina aad ku soo qori kartaan idinkoo su'aalaha naga soo weydiin kara hadba martida barnaamijka ka qayb galaysana su'aalihiina si toos ah loo weydiin doono haddii aan mar kale idinku celiyo saaxiibada nagu soo biiraya waxaad barnaamijka kala socon kartaan goobjoog t v twitterkanu ku leenahay pageka waa at goobjoog t v sidoo kale facebook goobjoog ayaad nagala socon kartaan pagekanu ku leenahay iyo weliba youtube-ka idinkoo sidoo kalena soo raaci kara pageka twitterka ee bangiga adduunka ee at mbf1 Soomaaliya oo su'aalihiina halkaa kusoo qori kartaan idinkoo markaa su'aalihiina weydiin kara martida barnaamijka ka qayb galaysa oo uu ka mid yahay wasiirka maaliyadda xukuumadda Soomaaliya Dr. Cabdiraxmaan Bayle oo barnaamijka qayb ka ah sidoo kale waxaa ku heliya martida oo barnaamijka kala qayb galaya la taliyaha dhinaca caafimaadka wasaaradda caafimaadka waa la taliyaha guud ee wasaaradda caafimaadka dhinaca Dr. Maxamed Jaamac iyo sidoo kale maamulaha guud ee xafiiska bangiga adduunka ee Soomaaliya Christina Stevenson waa Stevenson oo barnaamijka ka qayb qaadan doonto martiko ah halkaasna su'aalihiina markaa aad ku soo qori kartaan doonta iyadoo barnaamijkana qaybtiisa dambe uu noqon doono af ingiriisi oo markaa lagu daadin doono iyadoo sidoo kalena afka Soomaaliga uu ku bixin doono su'aalihiina halka ku soo qora iyadoo markaa la weydiin doono martida ka qayb galaysa barnaamijka labada saac soo socota ayuu barnaamijka socon doona daawadayaal idinkoo si toos ah uga soconaya goobjoog TV oo Facebook-geeda Twitter-keeda YouTube-ka aad kala socon doontaan waa tahay intaanu markaa u galin qaybaha kale ee barnaamijka iyo martida aanu isku soo noqonaya
dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya ayaa ka soo kabanayay wajiga saddexaad ee caabuqa COVID-19 dadkii ka dhashay roobabka iyo duulaanka ayaa kaasoo dalka ku habsaday sanadkii 2020 kobaca dhaqaalaha wax soo saarka dalka ayaa lagu qiyaasay inuu gaari doono 2.4% sanadka 2021
Somalia is doing better than before. It's always getting better and better, in spite of the fact that Somalia today is going through a tense period of elections. In spite of that, I think factors are all positive. Domestic revenue, which is a very important measure of recovery and success, has been picking up despite the coronavirus and the effect of the coronavirus. Exports and imports are also improving very well.
Intuusan soo shaacbixin caabuqa COVID-19 laamaha kala duwan ee caafimaadka Soomaaliya waxa ay ka soo kabanayeen 30 sano oo burburiyo xasilooni dara caabuqa ayaa daaha ka qaaday caqabado waaweyn oo haystay qaab dhismeedka laamaha caafimaadka Soomaaliya marka la eego baaxadda burburka dhaqaale ee jira iyo caabuqa COVID-19 oo ku faafay ilaa 20,000 qof iyadoo ay jirto eber dhibic 6 boqolkiiba dadweynaha ay si buuxda u qaateen talaalka COVID-19
general markii la yiraahdo isku socodkii ama maraakiibta ha noqoto ama kaargooga diyaaradaha aan ku keeni jirnaa ha noqoto aad ay nooga saameysay waxaan ka dareemaysaa badeecadaha kala duwan aan hayno qiimihii waagii hore aan gadi jirnay qiimaha hadda gadayno qiimaha hadda ya boqolkiiba wax badan oo ka badan tii hore waana saameyn guud oo ganacsiga ku yeelata COVID-19
warbixinada banka adduunka ee ku saabsan dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya qaybtooda lixaad waxa ay sahmin ku sameynaysaa qaabka ugu wanaagsan ee loo maalgelin karo daryeelka laamaha caafimaadka si loo helo kobac ku yimaada adeegyada caafimaadka. Sidee laamaha caafimaadka Soomaaliya loo xoojin karaa si ay wax uga qabtaan baahiyaha caafimaad iyadoo laga falcelinayo xaaladaha degdega ah iyo cudurrada sida lama filaanka ah ku faafa? Bixinada Banka Adduunka ee ku saabsan dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya waxaa si qaas ah uga heli kartaa goobjoog maalinta Talaadada ah taariikhda 14 Sebtembar.
Somalia's economy is rebounding from the triple shocks of COVID-19 pandemic, floods, and locust infestations that ravaged the country in 2020. Real GDP growth is projected at 2.4% in 2021. These owed to encouraging performance in the first 6 months of the year. Import and export volumes have increased. Remittance inflows, critical for household consumption and investment by businesses, increased by more than a third in the first half of 2021 compared to the same period the year before. This growth momentum is expected to continue in the medium term and reach pre-COVID-19 levels of 3.2% in 2023.
Somalia is doing better than before. It's always getting better and better, in spite of the fact that Somalia today is going through a tense period of elections. In spite of that, I think factors are all positive. Domestic revenue, which is a very important measure of recovery and success, has been picking up despite the coronavirus and the effect of the coronavirus. Exports and imports are also improving very well.
Before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Somalia's health sector had been slowly emerging from 3 decades of civil war and instability. The pandemic exposed and aggravated the pre-existing broader structural issues facing the country's healthcare infrastructure, making the response by the government wholly inadequate. Given the scale of the economic devastation and as the country's infections near 20,000 cases, with only 0.6% of the population fully vaccinated, the government has increased the healthcare spending to about 5% of the federal government's total expenditure. Targeted investments in health service delivery, financing, and sector stewardship would strengthen the sector, improve healthcare outcomes, and increase emergency and epidemic preparedness towards economic stability and growth.
General markii la yiraahdo isku socodkii ama maraakiibta ha noqoto ama kaargoogii diyaaradaha aan ku keeni jirnaa ha noqoto aad ay nooga saameysay. waxaan ka dareemaysaa badeecadaha kala duwan aan hayno qiimihii waagii hore aan gadi jirnay qiimaha hadda aan gadayno qiimaha hadda yaa boqolkiiba wax badan oo ka badan tii hore waana saameyn guud oo ganacsiga uu ku yeelatay COVID-19.
The World Bank's Somalia Economic Update Edition 6 explores ways of investing in healthcare to anchor growth. How can the Somali health sector be strengthened to better respond to health needs by improving outcomes and increasing emergency and epidemic preparedness? Catch the World Bank Economic Update exclusively on GovJog and YouTube on Tuesday, 14th of September from 9 a.m.
dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya ayaa ka soo kabanayay wajiga saddexaad ee caabuqa COVID-19 dadkii ka dhashay roobabka iyo duulaanka ayaa kaasoo dalka ku habsaday sanadkii 2020. kobaca dhaqaalaha wax soo saarka dalka ayaa lagu qiyaasay inuu gaari doono 2.4% sanadka 2021.
Somalia is doing better than before. It's always getting better and better, in spite of the fact that Somalia today is going through a tense period of elections. In spite of that, I think factors are all positive. Domestic revenue, which is a very important measure of recovery and success, has been picking up despite the coronavirus and the effect of the coronavirus. Exports and imports are also improving very well.
Intuusan soo shaacbixin caabuqa COVID-19 laamaha kala duwan ee caafimaadka Soomaaliya waxa ay ka soo kabanayeen 30 sano oo burburiyo xasilooni dara. caabuqa ayaa daaha ka qaaday caqabado waaweyn oo haystay qaab dhismeedka laamaha caafimaadka Soomaaliya marka la eego baaxadda burburka dhaqaale ee jira iyo caabuqa COVID-19 oo ku faafay ilaa 20,000 qof iyadoo ay jirto eber dhibic 6 boqolkiiba dadweynaha ay si buuxda u qaateen talaalka COVID-19.
General markii la yiraahdo isku socodkii ama maraakiibta ha noqoto ama kaargoogii diyaarada aan ku keeni jirna ha noqoto aaday nooga saamaysay waxaadna ka dareemaysaa badeecadaha kala duwan aan hayno qiimihii waagii hore aan gadi jirnay qiimaha hadda aan gadayno qiimaha hadda yaa boqolkiiba wax badan oo ka badan tii hore waana saameyn guud oo ganacsiga ku yeelata covid-19.
warbixinada baanka adduunka ee ku saabsan dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya qaybtooda lixaad waxa ay sahmin ku sameynaysaa qaabka ugu wanaagsan ee loo maalgelin karo daryeelka laamaha caafimaadka si loo helo kobac ku yimaada adeegyada caafimaadka. Sidee laamaha caafimaadka Soomaaliya loo xoojin karaa si ay wax uga qabtaan baahiyaha caafimaad iyadoo laga falcelinayo xaaladaha degdega ah iyo cudurrada sida lama filaanka ah ku faafa. Warbixinada baanka adduunka ee ku saabsan dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya waxaa si qaas ah uga heli kartaa goobjoog maalinta Talaadada ah taariikhda 14 Sebtembar saacadu marka ay ku beegan tahay 9 subaxnimo.
Welcome to the live launch of the World Bank Somali Economic Update. Over the next 2 hours, we will be exploring Somalia's economic performance and outlook during the COVID-19 pandemic. We shall be joined by the Somali Minister of Finance, Dr. Abdurrahman Bayle, and Minister of Health Senior Advisor, Dr. Mohammed Jama, and the World Bank Somalia's Country Manager, Christian Sefson. Please follow the conversation here on Gobjok TV, and you can also join the live stream via our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter, Gobjok TV, and the World Bank Somali Twitter handle at MBF Somalia. You can drop your questions there on the social media channels, and we will ask them live on air. This year's launch of the Somali's economic update comes at a time when global economics projected to rebound strongly is growing at 5.3% in 2021. Following the historic contraction of 3.5% in 2020 induced by the COVID-19 pandemic, this growth is forecast to moderate to 4.2% in 2022. A strong than expected global recoveries initiated in 2021. Helped by the large fiscal expansion in the United States and the rapid rollout of vaccination in many advanced economies. Despite a more boycott external environment, Sub-Saharan Africa will be the world's lowest growing region in 2021. The region is forecast to grow 2.6% in 2021, up from the 2.4%, the worst outcome on record, projected in October, supported by improving exports and commodity prices, as well as recovery in both private consumption and investment. However, this contraction was less severe than the 3.3% projected in October 2021, reflecting a slow spread of the virus and the lower than expected COVID-19 related mortality in the region, strong agricultural growth, and the faster than expected recovery in commodity prices. The pandemic hit fragile country like Somalia hard, and their recovery is set to be more sluggish, growing fragile and conflict-affected low-income countries, constructed by an estimated 3.9% in 2020. The pandemic continues to inflict pain in Somalia, which is still contending with an unprecedented health and economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Somalia recorded its first case on March 16, 2020. Like other countries, Somalia swiftly implemented national lockdown and other containment measures to control and contain the spread of the virus. While vital in saving lives, these measures had damaging effect on the economy, with traces in the number of cases and mounting economic and social costs of the lockdown. Somalia cautiously reopened its economy in August 2021. As the end of August 2021, it had reported about 18,000 confirmed coronavirus cases with 1,000 deaths. Despite the measures put in place, the virus has continued to spread. We are going to be showing the World Bank live from the studio. Remember to drop your questions on GovJoke TV, on GovJoke Facebook page, Twitter at GovJoke TV, and the World Bank Somalia Twitter handle at NBF1 Somalia.
Somalia's economy is rebounding from the triple shocks of COVID-19 pandemic, floods, and locust infestations that ravaged the country in 2020. Real GDP growth is projected at 2.4% in 2021. These owed to encouraging performance in the first 6 months of the year. Import and export volumes have increased. Remittance inflows, critical for household consumption and investment by businesses, increased by more than a third in the first half of 2021 compared to the same period the year before. This growth momentum is expected to continue in the medium term and reach pre-COVID-19 levels of 3.2% in 2023.
Somalia is doing better than before. It's always getting better and better, in spite of the fact that Somalia today is going through a tense period of elections. And in spite of that, I think factors are all positive. Domestic revenue, which is a very important measure of recovery and success, has been picking up despite the coronavirus and the effect of the coronavirus. Exports and imports are also improving very well.
Before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Somalia's health sector had been slowly emerging from 3 decades of civil war and instability. The pandemic exposed and aggravated the pre-existing broader structural issues facing the country's healthcare infrastructure, making the response by the government wholly inadequate. Given the scale of the economic devastation and as the country's infections near 20,000 cases, with only 0.6% of the population fully vaccinated, the government has increased the healthcare spending to about 5% of the federal government's total expenditure. Targeted investments in health service delivery, financing, and sector stewardship would strengthen the sector, improve healthcare outcomes, and increase emergency and epidemic preparedness towards economic stability and growth.
general markii la yiraahdo isku socodkii ama maraakiibta ha noqoto ama kaargoogii diyaaradaha aan ku keeni jirnaa ha noqoto aad ay nooga saameysay waxaan ka dareemaysaa badeecadaha kala duwan aan hayno qiimihii waagii hore aan gadi jirnay qiimaha hadda gadayno qiimaha hadda yaa boqolkiiba wax badan oo ka badan tii hore waana saameyn guud oo ganacsiga ku yeelatay COVID-19.
The World Bank Somalia Economic Update Edition 6 explores ways of investing in healthcare to anchor growth. How can the Somali health sector be strengthened to better respond to health needs by improving outcomes and increasing emergency and epidemic preparedness? Catch the World Bank Economic Update exclusively on GovJoke and YouTube on Tuesday, 14th of September from 9 a.m.
tadaawadayaal kusoo dhawaada barnaamijka uu markaa isagu soo bandhigayo bangiga adduunka oo GovJoke media groupna ay taminayso gaar ahaan GovJoke TV kusoo dhawaada barnaamijkaas labada saac soo socota ayuu halkan ka socon doonaa iyadoo lagu eegi doono bangiga adduunka ku eegi doono isbedelka dhinaca dhaqaalaha sida uu horumar u sameeyay iyo xaaladaha kala duwan intii lagu jira xanuunka COVID-19 oo safmar markaa dunida idil u saameeyay waxaan nagu soo biiri doonaa oo barnaamijka ka qayb qaadan doona bangiga adduunka iyagoo wadaan oo GovJoke TV-na markaa ay halkan ka baahinayso wasiirka maaliyadda xukuumadda federaalka Soomaaliya Dr. Cabdiraxmaan Bayle sidoo kale waxaa qayb ka ah barnaamijka ka qayb qaadanaya la taliyaha dhinaca wasaaradda caafimaadka Dr. Maxamed Jaamac iyo maamulaha xafiiska bangiga adduunka ee Soomaaliya Christian Sevson oo markaa barnaamijka ka qayb qaadan doona waxaad nagala socon kartaan oo barnaamijka kala socon kartaan GovJoke TV idinko sidoo kalena si toos ah ugala soconaya live streamka page-ka GovJoke TV iyo page-ka Twitter-ka @GovJoke TV sidoo kale waxaad kala socon kartaan bangiga adduunka page-ka Twitter-ka uu ku leeyahay @NBF Somalia Welcome to the live launch of World Bank Somalia's economic update. Over the next 2 hours, we will be exploring Somalia's economic performance and outlook during the COVID-19 pandemic. We will be joined by the Somali Minister of Finance, Dr. Abdurrahman Bayle, Minister of Health Senior Advisor, Dr. Mohammed Jama, and the World Bank Somalia's Country Manager, Christina Sevson. Please follow the conversation here on GovJog TV. You can also join the live stream via our Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter at GovJog TV and the World Bank Somalia Twitter handle at NBF1 Somalia. You can drop your questions on the social media journalists and we will ask them live on air. Now, handing over to the World Bank's communication specialist, Fatima Hirsi. Fatima.
waad mahadsan tahay maxamed bishaar oo si toos munaasabadan uga teebinaya GovJog TV muqdisho mudane wasiirka maaliyadda Cabdiraxmaan Beyle oon sugayno inuu noo soo galo qolka la taliyaha sare ee wasaaradda caafimaadka Dr. Mohammed Jama agaasimaha bangiga adduunka ee Soomaaliya Christina Svensson martida sharafta leh mudanayaal iyo marwooyin kusoo dhawaada teebinta tooska ah ee warbixinta lixaad ee dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya oo ka baxayso GovJog TV. Magacaygu waa Faadimo Xirsi oo ka tirsan bangiga adduunka. Waxaan idinku soo dhaweynaynaa barnaamijkeena maanta oo aad ayaan uga xunnahay inaan daahnay in yar. Waxaan rajaynayaa inaan maqalno ra'yigiina iyo su'aaladiina haddii aad qabtaan. dhammaan martidayada fadlan mikrofoonkaaga xiro ilaa lagu fasaxo inaad hadasho mar labaad soo dhawaada. Honorable Minister of Finance Dr. Abdurrahman Bayle, who we are expecting shortly, Senior Advisor from the Ministry of Health Dr. Mohammed Jama, World Bank Country Manager for Somalia Christina Svensson, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We apologize for the late start to this live virtual launch of the Somalia Economic Update, 6th edition on GovJog TV. The Somalia Economic Update is an annual flagship publication of the World Bank. It explores Somalia's economic performance and offers policy options. We look forward to your feedback and questions, and for those watching via Webex, please use the chat function to post your questions. You can also post your questions on our Twitter handle at MPF1 Somalia, at GovJog TV, and on GovJog's Facebook page. For all our guests, please mute your microphone until it's your turn to speak. Welcome once again. As an intro, Somalia continues to contend with the unprecedented health and economic crisis that began in 2020. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to ravage countries worldwide, Somalia had the added challenges caused by floods and the locust infestations. This triple shock pushed more people into poverty and joblessness in the past year. The latest Somalia Economic Update has a special focus on the health sector as it highlights Somalia's health system as the second most fragile in the world. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought the sector under sharp focus and put investing in Somalia's health system as an urgent political and economic consideration that is foundational to reducing fragility and enhancing economic development. The report recommends opportunities in the areas of health financing, health service delivery, and stewardship to improve Somalia's health sector. As we go to our speeches for this event, please join me in welcoming the World Bank Country Manager for Somalia, Ms. Christina Svensson, to make the opening remarks and to put into perspective our discussions here today. Christina, over to you.
Many thanks, Fatima, and thanks, Mohammed, and thanks everyone for your patience with the connection difficulties that we've had this morning. So I welcome all of you to this launch of the 6th edition of the World Bank Somalia Economic Update. It's my pleasure to be here together with Minister Bayle shortly, we hope, and as well as the DG from Minister of Finance and the Senior Advisor for the Minister of Health, along with our teams who have produced the report. So as you all know, 2020 was not a normal year. 2021 continues a difficult year for all of us, both personally and professionally and economic-wise. And while we see positive trends with the global economy expected to grow significantly, we also see an increasing divergence between countries that have started to normalize activity and have high vaccination rates and those that still face resurgent infections and rising COVID death tolls. In sub-Saharan Africa, we project growth to go from negative 1.8 in 2020 to projected 3.4 in 2021. But the recovery, again, is not assured, and we've seen that the last month or so in other parts of the world, as long as the virus continues to be there. This report that we're launching today then focuses on Somalia's and supports the debate around economic recovery based on real data. Similar to what we see globally, the near-term economic prospects depend on the pandemic's path. It's therefore very timely that this year's report focuses on the impacts of COVID-19 as well as the importance of investing in health. As such, Somalia's economy is rebounding in 2021 after the country grappled with the triple shocks that were mentioned previously of COVID-19 pandemic, floods, and locust infestations. Even though the economy continues to have lingering effects of the shocks from last year, recent data points to encouraging performance in the first 6 months. Bank deposits and credits to the private sector are on an upward trend, while the demand for automobiles, electronics, construction materials have increased, signaling increased business activity. Second, export volumes have increased, while total imports have grown as demand for consumer products rises. And finally, remittances inflows, as mentioned before as well, used by households for consumption and private business for investment, increased by more than a third in the first half of 2021 compared to the same period last year. Economic growth then, as also previously mentioned here, is expected to rebound to 2.4% in 2021 and reach its pre-COVID levels of 3.2 in 2023. And again, my colleagues will provide more details on this in their presentation. Our report contains 3 key messages. One is that the COVID pandemic exposed the cost of not investing in public healthcare systems. Targeted investments in health service delivery, financing, and sector stewardship would strengthen Somalia's health sector performance, improving health outcomes, and increasing emergency and pandemic preparedness toward economic stability and growth. Second key message, the disruptive impact of COVID-19 crisis on workers, labor markets, and livelihoods has further underlined the importance of the jobs agenda. There's a need to address medium and long-term effects of the pandemic by stimulating job creation, re-employment, and economic inclusion. This would be done by addressing 2 main challenges: creating better jobs that increase productivity and earnings for the growing workforce, and 2, supporting access to better jobs for youth and women. Finally, the third key message, programs that support vulnerable population, build economy's resilience to shocks. Extending the reach and responsiveness of social programs through the innovative and cost-effective use of mobile money, electronic cash transfers, and virtual engagement is key to supporting Somalia's vulnerable population. It could be done by adopting a national social safety net strategy that clearly sets out targets, populations, and deliver mechanisms, and is capable of being scaled up rapidly in response to economic shocks and reforms. And we have already seen the government starting to build this system under the BAC-NANO program, and as all of you will know as well, it's one of the key features in the HIPC roadmap. And finally, we would also like to emphasize that Somalia's economic outlook depends on the continued national commitment to economic reform to reach the HIPC, the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, completion point. This is critical for medium-term growth and access to much-needed external resources. Reaching the HIPC completion point provides a pathway towards achieving full and irrevocable debt relief. A peaceful election and a smooth political transition will also favor continued reform momentum and are also likely to support increased consumer and investor confidence. So with that, I will thank you, and again, I'm looking forward to the presentation and to hearing from Minister Bailey and Senior Advisor Jama. I will hand over to Fatuma Hirsi again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christina. I will just quickly summarize Christina's talking points in Somali. Christina is happy. Christina waxay tiraahday kusoo dhawaada warbixinta dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya ee lixaad. Waa markeeda labaad ay ka qayb galayso. Waana ku faraxsan tahay ka qaybshada sida aad uga soo qayb gasheen kulligiinba. Sanadkii 2020 ma ahayn sanad caadi ah. Faafidda COVID-19 waxay sababtay in dhaqaalaha adduunka galay hoos u dhac. Warbixinta aan maanta daahfurayno waxay markaas xoogga saaraysaa Soomaaliya waxayna taageerta dooda ku saabsan soo kabashada dhaqaalaha oo ku saleysan xoog dhab ah. Dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya wuxuu ka socdaa dib u soo kabasho sanadkan 2021. Inkasta oo dhaqaaluhu uu weli ku soo jiro marxaladii adkeyd ee sanadkii hore, haddana xoogtii ugu dambeysay waxay muujinaysaa natiijo dhiirigelin leh marka loo eego waxqabadka 6 bilood ee hore. Kaydka bangiyada iyo amaahda la siinayo waxda gaarka loo leeyahay ayaa kor u sii kacaysa, halka baahida baabuurta, korontada iyo qalabka dhismaha ay kordhay, taas oo muujinayso dhaqdhaqaaq ganacsi oo kordhay. Tirada waxyaabaha dibadda loo doofinayo ayaa korodhay, halka wadarta waa soo jeedinta oo sidoo kale kordhay sababtoo ah baahida macaamiisha ee badeecadaha ayaa sare u kacday. Qulqulka lacagaha xawilada oo ay qoysasku u adeegsadaan isticmaalka caadiga ah oo iyo ganacsiyada gaarka loo leeyahay ee maalgashiga ayaa kordhay in badan 3 meelood meel ahaan qaybtii hore ee 2021 marka loo barbar dhigo isla muddadii sanadkii hore. Warbixintu waxay ka kooban tahay 3 fariin oo waaweyn. Faafidda COVID-19 waxay daaha ka rogtay qarashyada aan lagu maalgelin nidaamka caafimaadka dadweynaha. 2. La tacaalidda sameynta COVID-19 ku yeelatay shaqaalaha suuqyada shaqada iyo ayaa si hoosta laga xariiqay muhiimadda ajandada shaqooyinka. Barnaamijyada taageeraya dadka nugul waxay dhisan adkeysiga dhaqaalaha ee shaqooyada. Aragtida dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya waxay ku xiran tahay ballanqaad qaran oo joogta oo ah oo ku aadan dib u habeynta dhaqaalaha si loo gaaro barta dhamaystirka HIPIC iyada oo aan loo eegin natiijada doorashada, taas oo muhiim u ah kobcada muddada dhexe iyo helitaanka kheyraadka dibadda ee aadka loogu baahan yahay. Christina waxay ku soo gabagabaysay inay hay'adda bangiga adduunka uu safka hore kaga jiro taageerada maamulada si wax looga qabto dhibaatada 3 nooc ah oo masiibada COVID-19 dadka iyo ayaxa soo noqnoqda. Now I return the mic to Christina to welcome the Special Advisor in the Federal Government of Somalia, Ministry of Health, Dr. Mohammed Jama, to make his remarks.
Thank you, Fatima. With this, I would like to kindly introduce Mohammed Jama, who's the Special Advisor to the Ministry of Health, to make his remarks. Thank you. Over to you, Mohammed.
It's my honor to participate this meeting on behalf of Her Excellency the Minister of Health, who could not be with us today because of prior commitment. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the World Bank, my colleagues from the federal and state ministries of health, and our development partners who collaborated and worked with us to finalize the first IDA-funded project in the health sector of Somalia after a hiatus of more than 3 decades. I would like to particularly acknowledge and thank the Health Task Team of the World Bank Somalia Office, the Global Financing Facility, whose tireless and the Global Financial Facility, whose tireless contribution and patience has paved the way and made possible the achievement of this milestone. The Damal Ahmad project, which is our flagship project for strengthening the health system in Somalia, is about expanding of service delivery to the vulnerable populations in the country. It's our vehicle of improving the services towards the services of essential services to the people of Somalia to achieve universal health coverage, inshallah. During the revision process of the essential package of 2020, we have deliberated and we have deliberately chosen a set of low cost but high impact health interventions that are feasible and scalable in the context of Somalia. We are cognizant of the limited domestic resources available for the health sector, although it's improving, and also the essential contribution that our external partners are making to the health sector. The country is emerging slowly from years of instability and fragility. It's our hope and expectation to see more domestic resource allocation to the health sector in the future. Chairperson, the Ministry of Health welcomes this update, this economic update. We are pleased to see the 2021 Somalia economic update featuring the contribution of the health sector to social and economic well-being of the Somalis. And this theme is timely, as all over the world, health has been confirmed and evidence has been gathered that health is both an input and an outcome of economic development. Existing evidence shows that investment in health gives economic returns in both the short and long terms. The current cost of ill health in Somalia, which is characterized by excessive mortality, morbidity, and disability, is taking a toll on the economic recovery of the country. It is therefore imperative for the government to put in place cost-effective policies, strategies, and services that can improve health outcomes at a more affordable and sustainable cost as we endeavor to lay the foundation of a resilient health system. The recognition of this reality has informed the development of this prioritized package of cost-effective health interventions for Somalia, which is being financed by the World Bank. The economic case for investing in health is strong. Health is wealth. The report documents in detail the contribution of improved health economic growth, which I think we will hear from our colleagues of the bank, from the World Bank. Educational attainment, productivity, saving, labor force, and school attendance, cognitive improvement. So health is not an expense, but clearly an integral part and a contribution to the economic development of Somalia. Chairperson, we remain optimistic for the future of the health sector in Somalia. We are confident that the contribution of Damal Ahmad project can make on the improvement of the health status of the Somali population, despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the delivery of the essential health services in the country. The Somalia COVID-19 emergency vaccination project, which we recently concluded with the bank, is another input to improving how Somalia can come out from the negative impact of COVID-19 as we expand the vaccination uptake in Somalia. The impact has been tremendous, as we have heard before. Prior to COVID-19 pandemic, the joint external evaluation of the international health regulations in 2016 and later on in 2019 acknowledged that Somalia had a nascent capacity in most of the 19 technical areas for the implementation of the international health regulations. coupled with the most multiple challenges that our health system is facing. The impact of COVID-19 on our fragile health system and the loss of lives and livelihoods and high out-of-pocket payment, which is estimated at 47%, has further pushed more people into poverty. However, the progress in child immunization and scaling up of antenatal and postnatal care and all other high-impact and life-saving interventions have been slowly picking up in the last many years, despite the COVID-19 pandemic. The findings of the Pulse survey, which Somalia participated, showed that substantial disruption still persists after 1 year of the pandemic. There's a continued disruption, but with the improvement and the uptake of the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, we expect that we will pick up very quickly. Chairperson, the report and the report that we are here today shows that the health sector is a critical component of the economic and social development of the country. The Minister of Health does welcomes this contribution, and we are looking forward to improved service delivery in the coming years. We are also looking our collaboration with the World Bank will also help the Somali government to improve the resource utilization, both external and domestic as well, so that the high out-of-pocket payment can be reduced and that people going into poverty because of health expenses can be addressed. Thank you very much. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jama. We will now go into the presentations of the 6th Somali Economic Update, and I welcome the Senior Economist, John Randa, and Senior Operations Officer Naoko Ono to present the content that they've prepared for us. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for joining. We are sorry for the delay because of the IT issues, but we hope I hope we'll proceed, and then we try to resolve the IT issues as we go along. Today we are presenting the 6th edition of the Somali Economic Update. Last year's was on securities and special focus. The previous year was on education. So this year we continue the health section. Blends very well with the COVID pandemic. So I will do the macro highlights, and then Naoko or Ben Olai will do will do the special focus. Thank you. Sorry. Now, on the main message, I think it's the same. The economy is contending with the effects of the triple crisis, which we discussed last year, and it was the COVID pandemic, the floods, and the locust infestations. Because of those triple shocks, the economy contracted by 0.4%. Less severe. Remember last year when we were in this room discussing about the effect of COVID, the triple shocks on the economy, we said the economy will be contract by -1.5. Before that, our projection was a contraction of 2.5%. So a contraction of 0.4% is a good outcome. Now, why from the analysis we get, we see that the economy did much better than expected because of higher official aid flows. Remittances went up by around 16 to 18%. The government took fiscal policy steps to make sure the economy was buffeted from the shocks. And then the social protection measures where money was given to people who were living in the rural areas under the Baksano program. So all these helped to cushion the free fall of the economy. And then the worst, what we feared was going to be worse for Somalia, was mitigated. However, despite a better outcome than what we expected, more people moved into poverty and joblessness. Now, the good news from this report is that we are seeing a turnaround. I will discuss that later. The outlook is positive. The economy is expected to rebound in 2021. So basically, we're having a V recovery, a sharp recovery this year of 2.4%. Whether 2.4% is enough or not, it will depend if you compare it with the population growth of 2.9. So the 2.5 is good, but not good enough. I think that's the message I want you to go home with. Now, the Somalia's fragility we know is, and it's something not going to be solved immediately. From the curve we are seeing the growth is always up and down, yoing up and down. So if you're looking at the historical, the growth perspective or the growth trajectory, we see that after the Somalis agreed on the provisional constitution, we're seeing the economy recovered, growing from 2013 to 2015, and then in 2016, 2017, the economy fell because of the drought, and then as measures put in place by the government and the donor community, I think the economy started to recover. And then we had this triple crisis of last year, where we had locusts, we had floods, and then the COVID pandemic. But we expect the economy to recover in 2021, as I have said. Now, I just want to say go into details on what the triple shocks were in the effect of the economy. This increased food insecurity as the production of food went down, as they were eaten by locusts and what we say, and the floods reduced the fields where agriculture was happening. And then, so productivity in the agricultural sector was low, and then this reduced the household income. As a result, according to the UN estimate, 7.2 million people in Somalia are at risk of food insecurity and livelihood by the year 2021. So even though we are talking about a good growth year in 2021, we are still seeing around 7.2 million people at risk. The COVID because this, I might be going back and forth. This update is about what happened in 2020. And then we are getting lessons, what we are seeing. And then when we have data for 2021, we talk about it. Now, in 2020, we are seeing that the impact of COVID was disrupted on farms, and this is from the enterprise survey. We are seeing that large farms really suffered, and not only in Mogadishu, but across towns in Somalia, whether they were small or big, then they had an impact. Initially, the impact was much greater, and then that was in June last year. But by December, January, when the economy was open, things started to pick up. And that's what this chart is saying, both in all sectors, manufacturing, agriculture, services, and across Somalia. Remember, before when these shocks used to happen in Somalia, like drought or floods, it only used to affect the people in the rural areas, nomads, people in agriculture. But with a COVID pandemic, every sector was affected. Now, this just says the same thing, what the situation was in January to February 2020, and what we saw and comparing February 2020 and January this year. What we see is that the percentage of farms which closed temporarily between February to July, at the start of the pandemic and at the beginning of this year, it was 45 at the beginning, but more farms had closed by January this year, so from 45 to 62. So most farms closed, and most farms adjusted their production activities. There are several ways how they adjusted their production of services, but that is in the report, and we invite you to read the report. Now, as I've said, as a result of these triple shocks, more people moved into poverty and joblessness. The poverty rate for Somalia still remains high at 71%, in 2020, which is around 2% higher than in 2027. Now, despite all this rebound we are talking about, the overall unemployment rate is still low, with only 55% of working age population in the job market. And then the contented measures severely disrupted business activity, as I said, in all areas of Somalia, and the conditions became less severe as the containment measures were revised. Now, in agriculture, because of, in Somalia, it rains in some parts of the region, in some other parts of the region it's dry. So the low and the erratic rainfall reduced agricultural production by around 6% in 2020. Now, the effect on, since we are reviewing 2020, the effect, we are seeing two things. Now, tax revenue, of course, because farms were closed, services were not provided, and tax revenue were not that high. We are trying to compare. Just a minute, having a technical glitch. Just a minute. Thank you. We saw revenue drop from, if you compare the actual numbers from 2019 and 2020, revenues reduced from 150 to 140 tax revenues million. Non-tax revenue reduced slightly. Grants actually increased a lot, or budget support increased from 89 to around 123 million. That's about 40% increase, but the grants to projects increased tremendously from 19 million in 2019 to 173 million. So donors came through. The Somali's friends came through for Somalia during the triple shocks. Now, how did the government use this thing? And this is for me, having worked for Somalia for 6 years, we are starting to see the light at the end of the channel. More resources are going to the social sectors. More resources are going to the economic sectors. The growth, even though the government is picking more responsibilities when it comes to security, more security spending is coming on budget, which is more transparent and all that. So I think we are starting to see orientation towards the better good for Somalia. And the growth in admin, and which is still important, because what the government spends on, even though it looks high, like 50% on admin and security, but it's very little money. Even though the amount the government spends as a percentage of its total budget is higher on salaries, but there are very few. There are still very few Somalia civil servants. So we have to put things into perspective. But despite that, we are seeing a commitment to government to spend more on health, education, on economic sectors. So as we go ahead, I'm seeing this happening, and with HIPIC, which I'll talk about slowly, I think the future is bright for Somalia. Now, now we are trying to compare, because of the momentum which started in 2020. I think the government expected more money from taxes, from grants, from non-tax revenue and all that. So we are seeing, if you compare the actual for 2020 and what they expected from the budget, I think there was some sort of optimism which has not been realized. And we are seeing that the grants, the government expected lots of money to come in from the donors, either through budget support or through project grants. And then we have these political shocks where the politicians could not agree on how to hold the elections, and that has disrupted the plan, the execution of the budget as it was planned, and that is very clear from this side. And this is a little bit unfortunate, because most of the money, most of the funds which Somalis have as for non-discretionary spending. But the good results, for me, we are seeing good outcome or outturn in the financial sector, where domestic assets and domestic liabilities has been increasing. Because of the measures put in place, that's the chart on the right-hand side, because of the measures put in place where banks were not allowed to expropriate or take out money abroad, the cash in hand for commercial banks increased from 22 to 37%. But because of the nature of risk in the economy, because of the COVID, the triple shocks, the banks were hesitant to giving money in terms of private credit. So we are seeing, even though assets went up, the commercial banks refused or did not lend as much to the private sector. And when they did lend to the private sector, it was more in terms of partnership. We are partnering with you to do this project. Now, on the external sector, when we compare 2019, exports were down because they could not export because of the Hajj and all that. So exports went down. Remittance imports more or less went up, but not as much, because the food imports was not that great, and people, because of the uncertainty, imports also came down. But overall, there was a slight increase in there was a slight increase in exports mainly because services were not exported and service exports did not perform well and exports did not perform well. Now, remittances, this is a very good story. Remittances increased 18%. And going forward, we have started to see the recovery. Exports are up, the nature of imports we are seeing is automobiles, construction materials, plant and machinery, which it appears the Somalis are looking past. It appears the Somalis are looking past the election, that things are going to be rosy, and people are preparing. I think wait and see. People are preparing for the elections to happen, to get out of the way, and then things will start. And that is why we are more optimistic about 2021, 2022, and 2023 going forward. Now, I can't end this presentation by not talking about debt relief. I think it was a momentous occasion in March 2020 when the country reached the HIPC decision point. And this is the interim period between the decision point and the completion point. And at the completion point, Somalia will be able to achieve full and irrevocable debt relief. So at the moment, Somalia is restructuring its debts with its creditors as part of the HIPC initiative. And though Somalia is not of the G20 debt DSSI, but the country, we need to acknowledge that before it reaches the decision point, the country remains in debt restricted and it cannot borrow. The borrowing is restricted until all that is agreed. Now, on the outlook of the medium term, let me just rush. 2 more slides to go. We are seeing after the triple shocks, we are seeing the economy recovering in 2021 and 2022. We are seeing our projection is growth will be 2.4% in 2024. Given the baseline, I'll talk about the conditions for the baseline. On our higher side, we are seeing a 2.8%. On the lower side, if politicians don't agree and things don't go as the Somali politicians, the political stakeholders have agreed, then things might be worse. And you just need to mention that our numbers is 0.4, but the government has the Somalia National Bureau of Statistics have a 0.3 growth. So we are in tandem. We just need to tweak the numbers between us, the bank, and the authorities. But 0.3% contraction and 0.4% contraction, there's no much difference. But we will sit down with the technical teams to resolve the difference. Now, what are our risks? What do we see, or what are our assumptions for the 2.4% growth and the good outlook which we are having for the future? In the baseline, for the 2% growth, we are seeing growth at the average rate. The good rates will be not high. They'll be average, historical average. Locust infestation will be brought under control. We are seeing Ministry of Agriculture and FAO doing lots of things to control locusts, even though we do have flood issues, but they are one-off here, isolated areas, but that is not, we are not seeing a general trend where they are flooding in the country. Now we are assuming in this, the 2% growth, that the support we are having under the Gargara program, where they're supporting the small and medium-term enterprises, and the Baksano program will continue. We assume that they'll continue. Remittances, already this year, we are seeing remittances are up by 30%. Last year the growth was 18%, so we assume that remittances will continue. Also, under this scenario, we are assuming that The pace of vaccination has been very low in Somalia. We are assuming that it will remain the same. Now, if that pace picks up, then I think we'll be on the upside scenario. Now, we are assuming again the 2.4% growth assumes that donor grants remains uncertain because of the uncertainty created by the political crisis. But I know the politicians are putting their house in order, but we're assuming that the security, the Al-Shabaab and those people against Somalia's peace remains checked under this scenario. Now, on the upward scenario, we're assuming adequate rains, the 2% growth, the 2.8% growth I talked about, we're assuming adequate rains, we're assuming no lockdowns, we're assuming that elections go well as planned. It was supposed to be October when we wrote the report, but now we hear it to be October, January, early next year, but that is still fine because tensions have been through. So if these elections go on, I think we'll have a good, and the investors are convinced that Somalis are talking, the Somalis antagonists are talking to each other, then things will be good. Now, on the downside scenario where things will be hard, but I think now it is too late. I don't think the downside scenario will be realized of the growth of 1.1%, because here we are things, politicians don't agree, elections are not held, the security situation deteriorates, but we don't see that scenario being realized thanks to the dialogue between the Somali political stakeholders. Now, this is almost my last slide. Now, what are the options for the medium term? Now, irrespective of what happens, Somalis, I'm told that Somalis may disagree on politics, on who is in the office, but they all agree on the reform momentum. They will implement what has been agreed with the external community. So the reform momentum will continue. Revenue will still increasing. Allocating resources to the sectors, as we have talked about, will continue. So everything. So the economic program will be sustainable, resilient, and inclusive. All sectors. I think this is very important. But there are also a trade-off for the fiscal space. Given, like now, there's a pandemic, should we spend more on health now in the near term? We'll have to learn how to live with COVID. In addition, should we spend, if we have more money, should we spend it on security, or now we should spend it on infrastructure, on energy, on roads and all that? And I've seen, working for the bank, I've seen more resources now going to energy sector and all that, improving the investment, the business environment, and all those. Those, for me, those are the programs which will make Somali grow, and growth will be more inclusive. Now, I've also seen Somalia spending more on expanding more on social programs to push on the poor and the vulnerable. More money is being spent on education, is being allocated to education. More money is being allocated to health sector. More money is being created to increase, to create employment and all that, and to enable business environment. I think these are the options. I don't think Somalia have so many options, but these options which Somalis already, the Somali government is already implementing, makes us believe that Somalia is on the right track for recovery. Thank you so much. Fatuma?
Thank you, John. I think we now have Nonko doing the second part on the health focus. Welcome, Nonko.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen? Sorry, can you see my screen?
Yes, now we
Yes,
can see your
yes,
screen very well. Thank you.
yes, go ahead. Okay, excellent.
Just put it in a full mode or something. It looks small. It's 36%, so
Okay,
you may want to make it bigger, like a presentation mode.
sure. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm still having a bit of the trouble, but hopefully I can do this quickly. Is this showing?
It's perfect.
All right, excellent, thank you. Um, all right, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this conversation. My name is Naoko Ono. I am a Senior Operations Officer of the Health, Nutrition, Population Global Practice of the World Bank. I am speaking from Washington, D.C. Today, on behalf of the World Bank Somalia Health Team, I am honored to be here to briefly present the summary of the health featured section of the SEU number 6. To prepare this report, we have support from the Somalia National Bureau of Statistics, DJ Shamarkan and the team. I would like to show our appreciation for this. So the details are in the report, so I would not go into the detail at this moment. But let us go through quickly about this, why investing in health is critical at this time of the COVID pandemic. So this is a global COVID pandemic is still ongoing. However, this is an opportunity actually highlighting this importance of this strengthening Somalia's health sector and health systems. As you know, Somalia is unfortunately experienced, like other countries, a third wave of this widespread transmission of the viruses, and suspected this emergence of new variants. At this first case of Somalia's COVID case occurred in March 16 in 2020, and to date, total confirmed cases are above 18,000 cases, with confirmed death is 982. This is as of September 4th. Despite government has been putting a huge efforts, which is commended in collaboration with partners. Unfortunately, still Somalia's capacity in responding to pandemic is still limited. According to this Global Health Security Index, Somalia ranks at 194th out of 195 countries. So that shows that there's a long way to go for this health systems. Because of this, investing in Somalia's health system to be more resilient, this is the utmost importance, especially at this moment, because this system needs to respond adequately to the pandemic. And then this will be the way to prevent potential of this instability and weakened economy. Then why is investing in health is important, critical for Somalia? Of course, as I said, because of the COVID, that's been highlighted, the need was highlighted. However, even before COVID, this has been the case globally known. There are many competing demands, different sectors, and why health sector investment is important. And first of all, as I mentioned, pandemic preparedness and response capacity is critical to minimize the damage of the pandemic and also maintain economic stability and growth. And second, investment in health is known to increase life expectancy and productivity. This will contribute to the GDP growth and economic development. This is maybe simply put, healthy children can learn at school and acquire skills. Then skilled labor force and increased productivity is actually the necessary input for the economic growth and therefore increased tax revenue. Actually, recent evidence shows that every $1 investment in health in a developing country yields $2 to $4 in economic returns. So that underscores the importance of the health sector for the economic development. And then third, as I said, this is an increased tax base and then workers, healthy workers to contribute more for this economic growth. The fourth, this actually will open up more opportunity, especially for women. Labor force participation. In Somalia, unfortunately, this is still formal employment in Somalia among the women especially is quite limited. However, in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, about more than 60% of nurses are women. Therefore, investing in health provides more opportunity to increase women's labor force participation in Somalia. And lastly, this will give a path for Somalia to reap capturing the substantial demographic dividends from improving life expectancy and reducing further fertility. High population growth at this moment, I'll explain later. At this moment, 2.9% of population growth. This is the annual growth. This means that the government will need to face enormous pressure to educate a large cohort of the children and then also respond to the increasing large demand for the health and social services to the increasing young cohort of population. Therefore, accelerating this demographic transition, so-called high fertility, high mortality, to the lower fertility, lower birth rate, and then low death rate. This is critical for Somalia to reduce child dependency ratio to accelerate the economic growth. So the report details the data and so forth. However, I'll just go through quickly about the status of this Somali health sector. Somalia has achieved a number of results in the early 60s and 70s. However, these achievements are deteriorated, undermined because of this conflicts. And then at this moment, health outcomes are lagging, although recently there has been improvement. And again, this life expectancy is still remains as low at this moment of 57.1 years. This has been an improvement from 50.4 years in 2000, but it's still lower than sub-Saharan Africa average of 61.3 years. As this graph right next to this text shows, this is the high burden due to the diseases. As Somalia is color-coded in red, shows that the high burden of diseases compared to other neighboring countries in Eastern Africa. And then, as mentioned earlier, it's a fertility number of children per woman. This is stay very high level in case of Somalia. According to the latest Somalia Health and Demographic Survey, number of children per woman is 6.9 children per woman. This is also, again, extremely high as compared to other countries in sub-Saharan Africa. As the right side the graph shows, this blue bar is Somalia's status, about close to 7 children per woman, while sub-Saharan Africa is below 5. This line is the average of less than 5. So it shows it's about 2 additional children in Somalia per woman. This actually results in the high annual population growth, and then subsequently, Somalia's population will double every 24 years because of the high population growth. And lastly, women's health outcomes, especially lagging. For instance, the death rate of women, 7.6 per 1,000 population in the age group of 15 and 49 years old. This is much higher than the same age male of 6.7%. This is actually a reverse trend compared to other areas of the world, especially in the context of ongoing instability, insecurity in the country, and then high rate of injury. Still, the women's death rate is much higher than men. So that underscores the severe potential impact from the high fertility and the subsequent high frequent pregnancy and the high risk of maternal death. Now, to achieve this health outcomes, so what kind of health services are provided in the country? So this is to understand this, the status of health services. Overall, health services and nutrition services are still limited, and then the current status is that still overall access to the health services is low, and then disparities across the geographic areas and the socioeconomic quintiles are still large. Maybe the graph is slightly small here, but outcomes is far worse in the rural and the nomadic areas. Also, there's gaps in the health-seeking behavior of low and high-income households. There's a huge difference. This means that when the health services needed, poor population, poor people will be hesitant to go to will seek health services, which has the implication, of course, to the health outcomes. And then maternal health outcomes are seen in better in the Somaliland than elsewhere in Somalia. So to produce health services, we know this health system is the main vehicle to produce health services. So what is the health system is like? As earlier I mentioned, health systems is considered to be second most fragile in the world. Ahead of this is Equatorial Guinea. But this is a starting point. Although we have witnessed, I worked in the last 3 years for Somalia, but this improvement in the health sector is it's commendable. but still, the health system needs to be further strengthened. So what is the bottlenecks at this moment in Somalia health systems? The first is inadequate health financing. As earlier, John Randa explained, this is an increase. However, it is government spending on health is still low. 2020 was about only 1.3%, but now we see the substantial increase in 2021, about 5%. Even though FMS's spending on health is substantial, but again, this is depending on the FMS, federal member states. And then we would like the government to see more spending on the health sector, and then government is responding to this COVID pandemic. However, this is we understand this large security expenditure needs, as John Randa earlier explained, but this is in a good trend, good trajectory, which we are really welcoming this trend. However, of course, this is called Abuja target. African Union set the target of at least 15% of total government spending on the health sector is needed. So this is, we are still a long way to go. To compensate this the government spending, currently there is a heavy reliance on the donor financing. 2019, there was close to $200 million inflow to the country in the health sector. This share is about more than 40% of total health spending. And then this is followed by equally large out-of-pocket expenditure. This affects out-of-pocket spending. It affects especially disproportionately poor segment of population. And lastly, public finance management system, this transparency, accountability. This is still to be in the midst of being established. However, this is a critical point, because once this accountability and transparency is shown, this will be likely leading to the gain of trust to the health sector, therefore increase the interest by development partners to put this the partners funding on treasury support. And the second point, after this health financing bottlenecks, there's a service delivery weakness. Maybe needless to say, there's still the large gap exists in the infrastructure, health infrastructure. There's two graphs in the right side. The top one shows the number of inpatient beds per 10,000 population. The red part is showing very low number of beds, while this dark green and green are relatively better off. However, still overall bed density is 5.3 per 10,000 population. And then also likewise health professionals, the map, color-coded map below, this is about the health professionals. As you see, again, red part is a highly deficit health workers. Southern part of the country, inpatient bed as well as a health workforce is quite limited. And then also this is well below the WHO recommendation. And then significant variation exists. And then filling this gap, Somalia has many foreign medical professionals from outside the country to fill the gap. And because of this service delivery weakness, and also the other reasons, utilization, people not are not utilizing the outpatient and inpatient services. The data shows only, for instance, only 0.2 per person of outpatient visits per year. This means that one person will seek service only once in 4 years or 5 years. So this utilization is quite low, which leads to the health outcomes. And the major reason cited for this constraints for seeking services is a cost and distance to the facility, and then the need for permission from the household head. And then third point of this stewardship capacity of the government. As earlier we heard that the government, the federal government is still relatively new. The government capacity is being now established. However, still the coordination capacity is needs to be strengthened. Because of this still nascent capacity, coordination capacity, there's a substantial fragmentation within the country, and also the donor financing and interventions. And then also this ongoing constitutional review process hasn't finalized. However, this is an important process to clarify the roles in the health sector between the federal government and member states. And lastly, we note that health sector is currently largely unregulated. Majority of services are provided by the private sector, and yet drugs, equipment, services, and the registration and licensing of health workers, the system is not in place yet. So here's the opportunity for Somalia to strengthen the health sector. Again, there's lots of items to aim for, but our recommendations as follows: health financing, health delivery, and stewardship capacity. So health financing, this is increasing the government expenditure. Of course, that's what we hope for. But not just the government spending, but we suggest this increased resource mobilization, not just for the government spending, but of course, from other donors, and then potentially the use of taxes. And then also the government side could utilize this purchasing services through this government, then focus on the government as a financier and purchaser of the services, and to oversight the health sector, while health service providers will be contracted for providing the services. And then used output-based formula. This is a slightly technical, but this allows the government for make sure the providers are focusing on the output, the results. And then the second point of health service delivery is that given the limited resources, that government needs to prioritize most cost-effective, high-impact health services based on this Somalia's major cause of mortality and mortality. And lastly, this stewardship, coordination function, improvement. The World Bank, as well as the Global Financing Facility and other donors of supporting this government's coordination function to align this limited resources, and then thus reduce further fragmentation. Then enhancing the government accountability and PFM structure. The government has spearheaded PFM reform government-wide. Therefore, the health sector should deepen this PFM reform within the health sector. The clarification of this health sector role between the FGS and member states for better utilize this for utilizing this private sector capacity. The government and private sector both should establish this relationship for effective partnership. Lastly, this regulatory framework for the health sector to standardize health services for safety and then for the equity. We are here to support the government and the country's efforts to build this resilient health sector and health system for further economic growth. Thank you very much. Mahat Sanid. Thank you. Over to you, Fatima.
Mahat Sanid Naoko.
Thank you.
And John for the wonderful presentations. I think now we will go into the session of questions and answers. But before we do that, I'd like to welcome the Director General in the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Suleiman Umar, to speak on behalf of the ministry. Unfortunately, Dr. Bailey could not join us because of other emergency activities. So welcome, Mr. Suleiman Umar.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Thank you, all of you guys. We have a hard time in connecting. We have a technical difficulty this morning, and for us, and I think the minister and also the other government officials not even join the meeting because of the difficulties. I've been assisted by one of the technical guys of the bank. Then that is, I think, money of the government. At least some of the government officials were able to join later on. So thank you for your time. I think the minister was the person who at least prepared for himself to at least to speak on behalf of the government, on behalf of the ministry. So thank you very much for your time. And I think this is a comprehensive presentation by John and Oko. And also the good remark is that Ms. Christina also Stephenson also made in this morning. The government really, we have, I think now, presentation is focused especially in detail on the health sector. The government has a priorities, and I think the health sector is one of the major priorities that the government is set for. However, sometimes when the domestic revenue is due to the shocks and the COVID-19 issue, COVID-19 pandemic effect is the domestic revenue has, and the government allocate enough resources to the health sector. The other for security challenges, and sometimes if you don't at least secure the security of, because the government is in fight with the terrorist guys who are going to at least to destroy the system, and at least that is why the government made security as a first priority to secure of the Somali citizens, and especially still the government is struggling even to affect the terrorist act. So sometimes to reconcile, even when you have a very limited resource, then at least choose the priority you set for. Sometimes a challenge, and sometimes to reconcile the health sector and the security costs. It is sometimes the government is facing, sometimes it is a real challenges. However, in 2020, I think the budget, if you see the increase of the budget allocated for the health sector, it is almost tripled when you compare the last year. So that is also the reason why, because of the Somalia crisis recovery project that the bank is funding, and also now the Damal Ashmad is coming, and also the vaccination is coming. So the government is willing at least to increase the inflow allocated for the health sector. But so far, when you look at the domestic revenue and the other economic shocks that the government is facing, even meet the daily basis obligation of the government and the functioning of the government, sometimes very challenging. However, the government is willing even to look at it and at least to increase gradually the budget allocation for the health education and other related area that the government is going at least to allocate some resources. But sometimes I think reality on the ground will not allow the government to fully fund these sectors, because of the the country still, because the government is controlling many of the areas still fall under the control of the bad guys, and sometimes even people living under that control are facing a very harsh rule imposed by the bad guys. And the government is trying at least to secure and reach out gradually the areas surrounding even the regions surrounded in Mogadishu, like Middle Shabelle and also Lower Shabelle, and also with the help of even the African Union Peacekeeping Mission and also the UN support and the World Bank, as all the partners are supporting the government. But the government is willing at least to allocate a resource, available resource for the health sector, and I think that is the government policy. But there's sometimes reality on the ground lead us where to fund when you have a very limited resource available for the government, and sometimes from the priorities. And that is it. Just this is well known by even the partners, and still we see the efforts of COVID-19, and sometimes some at least to affect the infection of this disease is also another challenge that the government is facing now. There is a policy that the government is going to at least to mandate even for government staff to have the vaccination, and at least those who are not already get the vaccination maybe will not be able to come to the government offices because of the sometimes high population in the offices. So still Somalia health sector, I'm not a professional one, but I know it is still a challenge. And the area that you have touched, like the child dependency, and also a lot of stuff, it's the reality on the ground. However, in a nutshell, that the government is willing now to at least allocate, and also there is also small resources available from the Gargara facility, that if the business people, especially business led by women, get an opportunity to secure finance for their businesses. Still, we see that there is a little bit still gap that the needy people to reach out the resource available for them. But the government is, overall, still we are convincing the banks at least to facilitate and reach out the potential people who are standing in need of financing for their businesses. So the government is really has a challenge, and thanks to the World Bank and other partners who are supporting the government, and really without them, we wouldn't be here today. And I think, so I would like to stop here and thank you for your time and the effort. Back to you, Zara. Fatou, sorry. I back to you the floor, Fatou.
Fatima, I think it is back to you.
Fatima.
Fatma, it's back to you. Fatma, can you hear us?
I think the room is muted.
Still mute, maybe, or she has connection issue.
Rhonda, can you hear us?
Yeah. My headphone, but I think they've muted the. I think they've muted the room. If you ask me, Michael, can you unmute the room? Hello, IT.
Being muted. Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello, we hear you, Fatima. Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Apologies. Yes. Sorry, apologies for that mishap. It was, I think, the electricity.
Fatma, we can hear you. We can hear you now.
Thank you, everyone. We seem to have lost Fatima. Can you hear us now, Fatima? No, I think she's having some problems. John, do you want to take over and moderate for if there are any questions before we close? Thank you.
Actually, we are in the same room.
Director General Suleiman Omar, for your insights and appreciating the work that the donor agencies are doing for Somalia. COVID-19 has affected everybody all over globally. So for a nascent economy such as yours, of course, it is difficult, double. I will now go to some of the questions that we have received through GovJog TV and GovJog Facebook page. You've lost me again. I can hear you, Christina. Have you heard me?
We have a hard time hearing you, Fatima. I don't know if it's me or all of you guys. It's very.
Yeah,
I cannot hear you well.
Yeah, it's the same here. Fatima, did you have any questions, or how are we proceeding now before we close, please? You can send them to me, and I can do them if needed. And I really apologize to everyone. I think, Fatima, if you cannot come in now, we will have to close the session.
Can you hear me, Christina?
Please go ahead. Yes, now we hear you a little bit better. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. It's that network. So I'll quickly ask some questions. And this question is directed to the Special Advisor in the Ministry of Health. What is the government's plan to prevent COVID-19 in the future?
Thank you very much, Fatima. As far as prevention is concerned, the science is still working whether infection can be prevented or not, even with the use of the vaccine, which is now being used. But the government has a comprehensive plan that we have put in place. It has public health measures as a key component, which you will now, if you call a number in Somalia, you will hear a message, a health message advising both the receiver and the one who is talking what they have to do and how they should avoid contracting a disease. So those public health measures are being, implemented despite the challenges that Somalia has. A complete lockdown like other wealthy countries have done at the beginning of the year of the pandemic, and even today, some of them applying parts of their country is not something that Somalia can forcibly or effectively implement because of our lack of social safety nets. People, have to go for their livelihood. So it is a matter of choice of, living or livelihood, which I think it's a very difficult question to put. So the public health measures, which involves the community leaders, awareness, the creation, the religious leaders, the government coordination mechanism under the Prime Minister, are all going on, including schools that, a closure of schools at the height of the pandemic, because we are seeing cyclical waves coming, and going. The testing capacity also, on the other hand, we have been expanding that. The number of cases that have been reported thus far, which is less than 20,000, is only at the tip of the iceberg because we don't have a widespread testing capacity across the country. But this has improved substantially since the beginning of the pandemic. And we hope that with the input of the new resources that we have received, we will improve further our testing capacity, because the more we know where the disease is spreading, the more the local authorities, with the support of our partners and the federal government, can take action. So the testing, a well, laid strategy that's globally recommended, and all countries, developed and developing countries, are used, is in place, which is testing, isolation where it's possible. But there is also other reality of lack of resources. Although the jump that you see in the health, expenditure from 1.3 or something to 5% in 2020 is mainly due to the injection of the resources that we have received in response of COVID-19. Also, we have to take into account our fragile health system that actually has been impacted, and we have data that the essential access to essential health services have been impacted negatively, like the immunization coverage, the routine immunization, childhood immunization coverage, and institutional deliveries at health facilities. But this strategy is working very well. Now, with the addition on Somalia having received the first, shipment of the vaccine, which is our best hope, which was rolled out in March, is also a major, strategy for the government to expand. But there are also questions of uptake here, which we are actually competing, or rather the misinformation in the media about the vaccine side effects and all that is one factor. So we see vaccine hesitancy, but also our vaccine delivery outlets, which is usually the health facilities, both private and public, are not the best, to increase coverage, particularly in the rural and also in our nomadic communities. So the strategy now is to do, outreach services, use the polio eradication infrastructure. Mind you, with our fragile health system in the country, Somalia has eradicated polio. We have stopped transmission of wild polio virus, and that infrastructure, which is mainly human, located in every district in this country, is a major asset that the government would use and mobilize. Our surveillance system is improving, particularly in the major border crossings and airports in the country. The demand on COVID-19, which is now is becoming more or less universal, negative test before you travel to another country, is also another major input to limit the spread of new variants. While we don't have the capacity for genomic sequencing, which actually hopefully will be established inside the country, but still we can work with our partners in the neighboring countries where we can test which variant is spreading in the country and affecting our population. Now, the last component is the critical care units in the hospitals. Our hospitals are in dire need of support. Oxygen, the oxygen, requirement for COVID-19 patients in major hospitals is quite, deficient, and we are now expecting vaccine oxygen plants, which we hopefully will receive during this month in September, at least for the major tertiary hospitals from north Somalia up to the south. And we hope that in each of the federal member states, including Somaliland, to have at least an oxygen plant that can produce not only oxygen for the hospital where it will be installed, but also can supply oxygen to the peripheral level. The challenge of the health system is a major obstacle in Somalia: workforce, availability, and also the distribution of the major health workforce, which are today concentrated in urban, settings. So the strategy, is quite clear, and we are determined to move towards that direction with the support of our partners, external partners, including the World Bank. And we hope that with the input of our own people to follow the public health measures and our community leaders, our religious leaders, and our government to reduce the impact that COVID-19 will have on the lives of our people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jama. The second question I'd like to ask, which takes over from what you just talked about, detailing everything that the health ministry is doing to help Somalia. And I'll pose this question to John. Would the effective rollout of a vaccine campaign raise the economic projections for Somalia?
Yes, I think Dr. Jama has detailed the reason why vaccination is important. In our modeling, we assume we saw vaccine hesitancy in the the baseline, and we think that will continue. But I was looking at the vaccination rates for Somalia of 0.6%, and that is very comparable to Kenya. So my take is that, our model shows it, that if more Somalis are vaccinated, I think the growth, I think that will have an impact on growth. Why is that so? One, Somalis trade with other countries. Investors would like to visit Somalia. So all this. And if people are not vaccinated and the virus mutates, as Dr. Jama has hinted, that will increase the probability of lockdown, or may reduce the opening up. So I think if more people are vaccinated, people will have confidence to travel to Mogadishu or areas of Somalia. Businessmen will be able to buy goods or provide services to other countries, and that will accelerate growth. So yes, more vaccination. I think the more people are vaccinated in Somalia, the higher the growth might be. Thank you.
Fatima, if I may add, if you allow.
Somebody's adding? Jama, Dr. Jama.
Fatima, can I add one more?
Yes, go ahead, Jama.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. I think also, as I said, there are two sides of the vaccination coverage. One, of course, is the demand creation and reducing the vaccine hesitancy. But the other side, and that is the government, responsibility, which we are trying very hard to overcome. But there is the other side of the supply side, which we cannot control, and we have no control over it. And the reason why I bring up this is the vaccine that's arriving in the country, as you have seen, as of a week ago, more than 75% of the total vaccine doses supplied to the world has gone only to 10 countries in the world, and Africa and middle income and low income countries, including Somalia, have received very little. So that supply uncertainty of when we can expect the vaccine is causing also an operational challenge for us, because if you are not sure when the vaccines will come, all the preparatory work that you do will not bear fruits because you don't have simply the vaccine. But recently, the vaccine supply has slightly improved, although we are not even very close to reaching the target of 20% by next month, or even 40% by the end of the year or early year. So that is a major challenge. And in fact, our government is reaching out, and it's working closely with the African Union. There is the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust that the African Union and the CDC Africa, the Centers for Disease Control, are spearheading. We are a member of that group, and we hope that the vaccine supply to Somalia will increase. But this is something that not only Somalia but the developing countries cannot control. The supply, and you have seen that the developed nations who were able to produce actually kept the vaccine within their populations, and that's also another challenge that Somalia is facing, like all other middle and low-income countries. Thank you, Fatima.
Thank you, Dr. Jama. Last question, which will be to, yes?
This is Banarolai. Could I come in very briefly on additional support that the bank is planning to enhance vaccination in Somalia?
Yes, please, Banner, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have just finished the negotiations for an additional $45 million to support the government of Somalia to deploy the already available vaccines that Dr. Jama has talked about, but also there's a possibility to purchase additional vaccines that the government may so wish. So one point that is important is to make sure that the government makes a formal commitment to the Africa Union AVAT mechanism. That has been pending because that's one way to plan for and secure vaccines for Somalia with these additional resources. So if the government can prioritize making that formal commitment to AVAT mechanism, it would help. So we see a positive trajectory with increased vaccines available, but also more resources to deploy them. The main challenge we had earlier was that the vaccines came in, but the government didn't have the resources to pay the vaccinators to transport the supplies, and this project is going to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard, for your input. So because of time constraints, we've taken too much of your time. I would like...
Yes, Padma. Padma from
Yes.
Minister of Finance.
Yes.
So thank you. Just here I want to highlight some points. All the DG to speak on behalf of the Minister of Finance. Just looking for the health sector opportunity and the creation of jobs. So how can we, the question I would raise to John, the sector of the investment in climate change and the opportunity of the health sector development, can we make any relation for the, because we have a lot of challenges for the investment of the climate change and also the economic, blue economy also. That's one question. The other one is we emphasize as the Minister of Finance using for the use of a country system working group, and we developed a new roadmap. That reference for the working group and the documentation of the objective of increasing on budget project is supported by in the short run to address the gap in the health sector delivery. So that's the other point for relating the next. As I asked you last year, the next economic update topic 2022 is very important to us to, if you have any, plan to that. Thank you. Over to you, Fatima.
Thank you. I think you addressed John with those questions, so he will answer. Thank you.
Hi, Wasame. On the question of the next edition of the economic update, I think we will reach out to the ministry. We have a tentative topic, but we'll reach out to the ministry and see how we can work together on the next one. On the question of climate change, we do realize that climate change is important, especially for Somalia, not only Somalia, the worldwide, but Somalia in particular. And that is something we've not modeled on this outlook, but that's something also we can engage and see what to do. Thank you.
In terms of what the bank is doing to help?
Yeah.
I'm not muted. Hello?
Now you're okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sorry. So this question is to Christina and Suleiman Umar. Christina can give her perspective of what the bank is doing to help Somalia. So what safety nets can be put in place to better prepare banks, business, and citizens from the effects of climate shocks or another pandemic such as COVID?
Thank you, Fatima. Maybe I can start just with a few comments. So on the safety net, I mean, again, that was one of the main key messages from this report, how important it is to have a functioning safety net program in Somalia when these reoccurring crisis happens. So almost all countries in Africa have safety net programs to address shocks. So we've seen a huge increase in the coverage and in the number of countries that have really worked on strengthening their social safety nets. In Somalia, in my mind, it's one of the key issues is to ensure that the support that is happening today is not as fragmented as it is. So it's really to try to pivot from the humanitarian social safety nets, which can be very important as well, of course, but to have the government take more of an active role in managing the social safety net. And in that regard, we are supporting the government to create a unified social registry to ensure that both humanitarian and development support is coordinated and that beneficiaries are registered and cannot duplicate their support and so on. So, and that is also one of the HIPIC completion triggers for Somalia to have a functioning unified social registry. So we are working on that while we are also providing cash transfers under the BACNANO program all across the country, supporting the government, the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs to deliver those cash transfers. So with that, I will hand over to DJ Suleiman. If you have any comments, please go ahead.
Thank you, Christina. You have said everything, so I don't think there is left a room for me to say something. You have covered it. Through the bank support, the government is willing even to strengthen the social safety net. And since the government resources is so limited, I think we rely for the time being on the bank support through the WFP, who reached out at least 1.2 million of households and handed cash transfers through the safety net program project. And that is, I think, a milestone. And also, by the time that the establishment of social registry is done, then we will be able to transfer data from the WFP and to the government, and then from there, I think the social registry kickoff will be easy for the government at least to issue an ID, social ID, public ID, to those already their data is available. And now there is a challenge, at least for the time being, at least because this is new to Somalia, and sometimes we might have at least some resources. The government is just for the time being we rely on the support provided by the bank, but since the government resources are very limited, so that is where we are for the time being. And I think with the support of the bank, we will reach the target. But so far, we at least the only resource available for services net is coming from the bank side. And thank you for the support the banks provide. So that's it. So back to you, Fatou.
Thank you very much, DG. Now I will request Christina, yourself, and Dr. Jama, if you have any parting shots, each of you, a minute each, and then we can conclude this session.
Thank you, Fatima. And again, apologies to everyone for the connection issues that we have encountered. We will take the feedback and try to improve for next year. No, thanks again. It's always a pleasure to do these, and again, it provides a sense of continuity, I think, and a very useful regular meeting to see how Somalia is progressing. So I think we have seen that despite the difficult period that we are going through, that all countries are going through, and especially Somalia with the triple crisis, that there's still progress and there's still movement, both in terms of providing more benefits and more social transfers, and also on the growth side. Even though it's modest and more progress is needed. So with that, I'm looking forward to next year's release, and I think the idea of climate change is a good one. So I think we will take that on board, and we'll discuss with the team how we can incorporate climate change into our next Somalia Economic Update 7 for next year. So thank you very much to everyone. Thank you, DG, and thank you, Mohammed from Ministry of Health.
Thank you, Christina. I really appreciate that this year's report, the economic update for Somalia, has really focused on the health sector and highlighted the contribution of the health sector to the social and economic development of the country. This is a major milestone for us, and we are really looking forward to spreading the word and sharing these findings, which are really very important, as some, although I don't believe a lot of our community think that way, but still some believe that health is only an expenditure and does not contribute to the social and an economic development of the country. And this is the evidence that the World Bank have gathered, and our Ministry of Finance is a testimony of what the health sector, the role the health sector can play in rebuilding Somalia's economy in the future. We would like the health not to be dropped completely, although I understand that you choose a theme every year for the next year. We would like to be engaged and even deepen the analysis to collect more data in Somalia, as my colleague Nako and Bernard were mentioning, a health financing, unit that can really do economic analysis for the health sector and a proper costing of the, and the cost of doing business in Somalia in the health sector, which is quite high. So we would like to see other aspects of the health sector in the future as we roll out the Damal Ahmad project to be reflected in the future reports. I would like to particularly thank my colleague, my friend, my brother, DG Suleiman, who has been a member of not only the Ministry of Finance of our government, but also our health team. We would like to thank you. Of course, I take this occasion for leading the negotiations of these key projects of the health sector and for guiding us, since the health sector was new to some of the work that was being done with the World Bank. I would like to register my appreciation and gratitude to you and to the whole team. Thank you very much. Over to you, back to Fatima.
DG, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Jama, for the kind words, and thank you, Christina, for the closing remarks, which is really the most important. We, as a government, try our best at least to do our best even to make the health sector a priority for the government, though we have many priorities and we are enforced even to choose the priorities from the priority. So, but the government is willing at least to face the shocks, though our resources are very limited. But with the support from our partners, including the World Bank and the other partners, we are going to sustain and at least reach out the area that still need help, and the people are stand in need of the assistance, whether if even to reach out the many areas and at least to facilitate and at least brainstorming the normal society to at least to spread awareness for the even people, encourage them to come forward and at least take a vaccination. And that's one thing. The other thing is that since now we are preparing the budget for 2022, I think we will look at the envelope that what is available for us, and we will put a resource for the health sector. And I think that with the help, even support from the bank, including the Damal Ahmad project and also the Somalia emergency, COVID emergency vaccination project, I think the allocation for part of the allocation for 2022 will be increased, and now we are in the preparation of the budget envelope. Already the circular budget has been shared with the MDAs, and I think the Ministry of Health is well aware, and they at least will submit the budget estimate for 2022. I think that now, since we have been experiencing economic shock and the climate shock, Somalia is still struggling even to meet. The government is struggling to meet the government running costs, and this to cover the obligation pay, the salary of the civil servant and security staff is the priority one when it comes to which is the priority, because when we submit the budget to the parliament makes priority from the priority, and we are enforced to follow the priority based on the Appropriation Act passed by the parliament. However, the government is so vigilant and needs to look at even to allocate, though it's more to allocate the resource from the government inflow for the health sector and also for the economic shock caused by the impacts by the COVID or other climate shocks. So thank you for your time, and I really I see that the number of the government officials who were going to join this meeting were unable because of the technical issues. So, however, we will reach out and at least inform them that the mission is done smoothly. And thank you for your time and for the support. I stop there and thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, DG. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our broadcast, and we thank you all for making the time to join us. Our special thanks go to, of course, Mr. Suleiman Omar from the Ministry of Finance, Dr. Mohamed Jama from the Ministry of Health, and Christina for engaging so well. To John and Naoko for highlighting the Somali Economic Update 6th edition, and of course to Gobjok TV for holding us live. Please remember to continue to follow us and continue the conversation on our Twitter handle at MPF1 Somalia. And I would just like to say, mahadsanidin all kulliyen kuwa maanta laga soo qayb galay programkan. Waxaan hadda ku wareejinayaa Mohamed Bishar, Gobjok TV. Mahadsanidin kulliyen.
aad u mahadsan tahay Faadumo, madaxa communicationka iyo xiriirka xafiiska bangiga adduunka ee Soomaaliya ay taasi ahayd oo markaa ay noo waday barnaamijkii qaybta 6 ee bangiga adduunka warbixinta dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya oo ka diyaariyay sanadkan oo markaa bangiga adduunka uu soo agaasimay. Gobjok TV ayaa markaa idin baahinaysay oo halkan aad kala socoteen. Anigoo Maxamed Shaariya studio dhexe ku sugnaa idin la socodsiinaya dhammaantan isku duubano waxaan idin leenahay sidaas iyo nabadgelyo.
dhaqaalaha Soomaaliya ayaa ka soo kabanayay wajiga saddexaad ee caabuqa COVID-19 dadkii ka dhashay roobabkii iyo duulaanka ayaa xakaasoo dalka ku habsaday sanadkii 2020. kobaca dhaqaalaha wax soo saarka dalka ayaa lagu qiyaasay inuu gaari doono 2.4% sanadka 2021.
Somalia is doing better than before. It's always getting better and better, in spite of the fact that Somalia today is going through a tense period of elections.